Okay, let's roll. Gaslight, gatekeep, girlboss, what went wrong? It won't be a rant and it won't be a roast, but we will complain a lot during this speech. And please believe us that we are not enemies and we do not hate each other. Krish is...
I'm a researcher.
Yeah, and I am, let's say, generally a designer, mainly service design, but product design also, sometimes at least. Okay, so it won't be a case study, nor it won't be a set of tools that you can implement in your work. We will go through, let's say, some things that we don't like in each other in our daily work. But before we start complaining, I have an ongoing bet that I will always include this one diagram in my every presentation, every conference. I hope that you know it is the three lenses of innovation by IDEO that shows us what are the areas that we need to consider when creating innovations. The first one is, how does it work? The first one is desirability, and it definitely don't work. OK, it's better. The question is if there will be people that will be willing to use it. The second one is viability. So the question is if it will be profitable for the business. And the third one is feasibility. So if it is possible technically to implement. There is also another diagram that is pretty similar, but with four lenses, the four big products risk by Matti Kagan from the second edition of Inspired. And as you can see, the desirability was divided between value risk and the usability risk. So there are two areas regarding the user or customer. But also, in this book, Matti Kagan divided this work between different roles in the product trio. So the value and viability would be the domain of the product manager. Usability would be the responsibility mainly of the designers. And the feasibility would be the responsibility of the engineering team. There are some problems with this diagram. The first one is that instead of creating innovations, we are trying to mitigate the risk, which I don't really like. The second thing is that with the roles defined in that way, there is no place for researchers. So when you look at the current discussion around the discovery, especially the continuous discovery by Teresa Torres, we will notice pretty quickly that, there is the product discovery. In theory, it is the joint action by product managers, product designers, and engineers. In practice and in memes, it's usually the common work by product manager with the help of the user experience specialist called the product designers. But in practice, more often than not, product discovery is being taken over by the product managers. Product designers want to do something, but they are very often reduced to the role of people who draw interfaces. And researchers, they do not exist in this puzzle because there is no place for researchers in product trio. OK, so why is that? Let's gaslight each other a little bit. In random moments, there will be quotes from our favorite songs just to create the vibe for our rant. You can look for it on Spotify. So when I think about what is wrong between me as a designer and researchers, both from the research agencies or from the internal teams, usually I don't really need research. I need research results to work with and to build upon. The second thing is that I really want to get some revelations about the product, some areas I can explore a little bit more. And usually I get the most obvious things on earth in the research reports. And the third thing that I feel is a little bit of gaslighting me by researchers is that they use a hell lot of symbolic violence around the research methodology. Seriously, I don't need to know that there was a statistic method called the non-binary tree testing method applied. It's good for the non-binary trees, okay, but still it doesn't change the fact that I cannot do anything with the results I've got.
Rude.
Sorry.
Okay, but there are things I have a problem with as well, okay? So a big problem is, closer, okay. Very often we hear that everybody loves research, right? Like research, user perspective, customer centricity, it's all great and good. However, then when we actually get involved, we see a lot of product people completely go wild with their pre-existing assumptions and decisions they've already made. And that's pretty frustrating. Also, very often we hear that something is about research, and we of course get so excited. And then we learn that actually it's some buzzword, it's some exciting new word, but it doesn't actually mean that any research is happening. Also, I don't think product discovery, whatever it really is, because we will get to that, helps. Because we need discoveries about the product, revelations even, if you will. And just calling something product discovery doesn't mean we are discovering anything.
So it seems that we need the same things or similar things. So what has happened that we don't like each other anymore, at least in the workspace? So we are all trapped in the echo chamber hellscape of terminology. And when we were trying to discover what discovery really is, we used the most sacred research method available, so Google search. We discovered that there is no common understanding of what discovery is. In one place, you can read that discovery and research are two completely different things, and you are wrong mistaking them with each other. And in second place, you will find the article, How to Conduct a Product Discovery Research. So it is joined in one place. And
I hate it here. In the hellscape, you know?
Yeah, it's the hellscape, and it is something that goes through the whole product development and design area, because there are new fads and new fashions every single quarter that are making it impossible to communicate between different specializations and between different companies. If you look at the organizational charts in different companies, you will see that there is no common ground in it. So, to be honest, maybe none of us know what product discovery is. And to be honest, it's too late to ask each other how do we understand it. But if we don't know what it is, let's girl boss a little bit. So, another quote, we all need to be loved just like everybody else does. We will try to look for some, let's say, things to ask the other side to make our life easier. And the first one, in my case, is, dear researchers, please don't treat the research as a completely separate area. In many cases, after several weeks of research and waiting for the research report, I was presented with segmentations that go nowhere, the customer maps that leads to the wilderness, personas without personality. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting only to get something that was unusable in my work as a designer. And of course, it is a very valid assumption that research should look for some truth about the world. And it's okay, it's completely true in the academia, but at the same time, in the product work, I need some results to build upon. And research is not self-sufficient by itself. The discovery report is not the final artifact of any project, and usually the research project should be in some way connected to the design work. So even a worst-case scenario is research that concludes in the conclusion that we need to do more research on the topic because it was unconclusive. Yeah, it's pretty nice, but we cannot get into this vicious circle of researching and researching without building anything. And in her work, Teresa Torres did divide the research into two areas. The first one is project research, so the strategic research aimed at finding the strategic insights to build the strategy and the vision, and the continuous research or discovery research that is done on a daily basis every week by, well, let's say anyone, because the project research, the strategic research would be conducted by the researchers in their ivory tower, and the discovery research could be done by, well, let's say literally anyone with a Google. So I don't really believe in it, and I like processes. I'm a service designer, so why not? And I was thinking, what's the difference between planning the design work and the research work? It's the MindArt framework created by me, but inspired by the HyperIsland EdoArt, the framework for planning meetings. And I use it mainly for planning work and creating the offers for the clients because most of my work is done in the agencies or as a freelancer. And the first thing that should be followed by anything else is the intention of the project. So there's no need to divide the research between strategic and non-strategic or the daily research. We need to think every single time what do we want to achieve in this research. And in Cohesion, we had the saying that it's always better to get one very tasty biscuit instead of one very large wedding cake that is inedible. Maybe there's no need to divide it between wedding cakes and biscuits. Maybe we should create the confectionery that is suitable for the kind of party we are trying to attend.
Yes, so you mentioned those two types of research. And the problem is that, of course, our ivory tower is beautiful, but we have no access to whatever is happening. And what happens in this ongoing research done by, as you said, people who are not necessarily researchers, it's basically microdosing research quite a lot. And the problem is that just because research activities are happening, it doesn't mean real research happens, right? Like we don't really have knowledge that could be valuable, right? So it's pretty trendy right now to be very continuous with your product discovery, let's say, right? So we talk to people constantly, but just because we are talking doesn't mean we're actually learning anything. Mm-hmm. So research is something, you know, a little bit of razzle-dazzle, like a little bit of sprinkle on top. And that's not what we actually aim for, right? We want research to provide something meaningful, and I think you want it too.
Yeah, I really want it, and when you say about that, I think about the product idea confidence meter by Itmar Gilad, and to be honest, testing the ideas is a valid method to create your product vision and backlog. So if you will get a lot of product data from these weekly interviews, it will create a big body of data that we can use. So it is quite valid. It's 3 on a scale from 0 to 10.
Well, what we see happen, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but a lot of the time, is that whenever there is a disconnect between researchers and product people, things start going wanky on this particular wheel. And very often we see test results or customer evidence slightly pushed back to the blue part of the wheel, while sneakily some of those opinions, ideas, visions revealed in dreams are kind of pushed to the red area, and suddenly whatever insights we have are being undermined because we need to make way for some product manager glorious idea, right? And we can't imagine how hard it is for our small talk.
Okay, so it seems that we are on the same side or slide.
Curious.
So, curiously, yeah. So the second thing, I would like to ask all of the researchers, please give me the results I can build upon. And I do understand the beauty of data, but to be honest, pure data I sometimes get from the research team don't really matter. Because, for example, what can I do with 400 slides of details about the usage of different payment methods in some industry if there is no connection between it? So I got a lot of data, but I don't get a lot of information, not to mention the knowledge or wisdom that can be used to facilitate the product development. And as someone said, you don't get the brownie points for the data. It's not research. So what do you expect from us with giving us this raw, unprepared data? We will just work with it. So, of course, if we got the data, we will try to connect it in a way that we understand. It might end up with the conspiracy theory about the product, but if you won't help us, we will do it. So our one Christmas wish is please give us actionable insights, or Rainbow Dragon if you cannot give us insights.
Fine. Okay, so our problem is, again, something you mentioned before, and I think we all agree here that there is a problem with continuity, but also with sharing some visions, right? Because if we are only involved, if we are only allowed to research when it's comfortable for you without considering the whole, as you said, we're trying to build a product here, right? And we should work together because if we are only involved in validation, we are there to mitigate risks, which is all great and good because technically at least we avoid making huge mistakes. But does it mean we are actually embracing all the opportunities? Probably not. Yes, and very often, whenever there is research involved in a, let's say, semi-mature organization or project, there is some preparatory research, which is very often done by desk research, by some data requests to the right people, which of course can be extremely helpful. However, then we very often skip through the exploratory research. We are removed from the process and only invited back for validation of ideas, which we had no hand in. Yes, and then we wonder, okay, what made you actually build those ideas? Where do they come from? Yes, and I believe in political system based on magical women living in lakes distributing swords to proper kings, of course. However, sometimes it's nice to have some solid ground to stand on.
And it seems that we are going back to the Itmar Gilad confidence meter, because self-conviction is the absolute worst of all of the sources to build your product upon. So are you saying that we are only testing how good we realize the things that were built on wrong assumptions?
I'm not saying it.
Okay. Okay, but can we somehow change the situation and, let's say, stop gatekeeping our competencies and create a common front? Can we all live in the happy house when it never rains and products are thriving?
Yes, and one of the problems that I think we need to overcome is the fear of not being objective, not having the right information to build on. And it's a very real problem. So very often, if we don't work closely enough, if we don't believe each other, the problem is that whatever comes from research, especially if it doesn't fit product people assumptions, it meets with distrust, with, undermining attempts even. And it's good. Of course, you should challenge the ideas you are delivered. But if they come from research, right? Maybe we should agree on methodology and then follow with some trust. But then everything seems to be more believable than research, right? Like there are so many buzzwords that seem so objective. And in the absence of trust, as you saw the circle, right, of certainty, of course, product people will try to base their decisions on something that seems more solid, even if it isn't. So very often metrics seem safe and trusted. And very often whatever comes from the, research, no matter how rigorous, will be like, well, we've heard it all, right? Like, oh, it's a qualitative data. So, of course, it's just 8 people. We shouldn't really believe it. Then we provide quantitative information, and they're like, well, okay, but what about the sample? Oh, the sample's good. Well, the questions were still about declarations, so can we believe declarations, right? So no matter what we bring to the table is not really trusted. However, any metric possible is great and good because it's objective, because it's numbers. But we have so many cautionary tales about situations when big business decisions were made on metrics that were true, were real, but they were not the right things to look at, or they were not telling the full story. I worked through a project in which we were trying to make some very big decisions about trust among users, and that was a transactional platform, so of course it was pretty basic. And the only metrics that product manager wanted to look at was how many reviews people give each other and how many of them are positive. Which is amazing, right? Because we could very easily observe that, and we saw how numbers are growing. It was great. However, do you see a problem here? We knew that there were more and more reviews. We knew more and more were positive. But we didn't know if they were deserved. And the quality metric was missing so sorely that basically we got to the point that we had no idea if the good agents were actually being rewarded and the bad agents were being punished. And if that was not happening, no matter how many great reviews we're getting, we could have been doing more harm than good, which actually happened to be true after years. So metrics are great, but if we actually start trusting each other, we can put them in a context that would help us build a full picture, because it's never just numbers, it's never just insights. And we have to trust the information with the amount of trust we are safe to actually attribute. Yeah, and that's what happens very easily, especially if those details actually happen to support someone else's pre-existing ideas, and that's just dangerous.
Yeah, and we have an example here about overfixation on unimportant details. We had a project in which we've got the research data from a very big research regarding the usage of some services, because it's, well, let's say, it's not the brightest point of this company. We will not tell you what was the industry and what was the name of the company. But there was one very important metric that was taken. It was how much time before the actual service the customers were at the place of the service. And according to our observation, it would be like 10 minutes maximum. According to the research, it was nearly 30 minutes, so like 3 times more. How is it possible? So they didn't want to ask people about how long they were waiting before getting the service. So they were only asking the people who were waiting for the service. And at the same time, the interview took circa 15 to 20 minutes, which means that all of the people who were in the place after this threshold, after the 15-minute threshold, they weren't invited to the interview because they wouldn't manage to answer all the questions. But the metric was the fact that it has to be observable, objective metric, not just declaration, was so important for the research manager that they decided to go with it, creating a completely useless body of data.
Yeah, the problem was that they never trusted declarations done by any study, quantitative and qualitative, even in person. So they were like, we need time measured in minutes, but at the cost of a huge sampling error, right? So again, you have to know what you're doing in order to give the information you need. But if you only focus and hyper-focus on the perceived value of just one type of insights, you ignore the methodology that leads to their creation.
Okay, so we are talking a lot about methodology, and to be honest, as a designer, I share the love for the methodology, but sometimes it happens that the results are valid from the, let's say, academia point of view, but at the same time, they are so uncreative and so, let's say, not insightful that it's hard to use them. And I remember a project in which there was a big research made, and the aim was the segmentation, to be exact, the behavioral segmentation that would be a base for designing solutions for different types of customers. Well, these segments were made, they were statistically proven, and they followed the progression. The more you spend, the more you use the service. So we had the low spenders, low users, medium spenders, medium users, and high spenders, high users, which is kind of obvious, and at the same time, there were no other characteristic, at least not statistically significant characteristic, that would go with this segmentation. So we've got just the info that people are paying for the usage, and that was all. But yeah, it was statistically proven. The methodology was impeccable. The SPSS was very happy about the generated results in the statistic report. Even though sometimes I would like to kneel before the beauty of methodology, sometimes it is a type of constraint that prevents us from designing good things. And then I don't really want to do research anymore.
Yes, but the thing is that there is a reason why we are something very particular about methodology. We see that methodology, especially if it's trendy, is very attractive to non-researchers, which is great. However, sometimes we see that cherry-picked for the vibes, for the aesthetic, right? And one thing about me is I'm a linguist as well. I was a linguist first. So the problem is that there are people, you know those people, they're not linguists. They don't care that much about the language, but they have their favorite language grammar errors. And they will make their whole personality to point it out in people using that. There is this one mistake, and they will always point it out, and they will feel so much better about themselves because they are not making that mistake. They could be making 100 other mistakes, but that's not important. And the same thing happens with research. So you will see product managers, designers, engineers using some principles. They would be extremely particular about sampling or about not asking a problematic type of question. They will seem to be perfect allies until you see them work and discover that actually the whole other part of their research work is done very, very poorly. And they only stick to that one principle because they heard it somewhere or they read that one book. And I'm not saying we are trying to keep it away from you. I'm not trying to rob you. I'm trying to help you, right? The thing is, you can have it, but please pay more attention and ask me for help if you're not sure.
Thank you, Gandalf. So the other thing I have is, I might sound like a broken record now. Please tell me something that I don't know, because quite often you can see the report results that are telling, for example, that the customers are price sensitive.
They are.
They are, I know, everybody knows that. And that was the main conclusion after like 40 interviews and 7 customer journey maps. So it was kind of disappointing. And it's not strange that after all that, I am trying to conduct my own research, usually with methods that are not really correct, probably, because I don't want to only get the information about what people say or do. I would like to get the deeper insight. For example, why are they price sensitive? So, for example, lately I was experimenting as a designer with co-creation techniques or performative techniques like playback theater, because I would like to get the foothold for the next step, not the absolute truth made in a very correct way.
And that brings us back to the problem of buzzwords and fashionable methods or frameworks that you learn about at conferences. So, you know, those are fads. Those are fad methods. And as we all know, it stands for yes. So it's very fun to do new things, to organize your whole work in 5-day sprints, for example. But you really should know why you're making those decisions. And what we see in a lot of our clients and our businesses, those decisions are made for the fun factor. Research is something that is supposed to be exciting. Very often, researchers are tasked with the job of making everybody more excited about customers, more excited about business goals, about KPIs. And, you know, we are amazing entertainers, of course, but I don't feel it should be that much of our work.
Okay, but again, we are circling around the methodology, so maybe you should stop gatekeeping it. There was a whole speech just before us about teaching research to non-researchers. You know, please give us a little treat.
Fine.
Okay, but I think that, again, after all of these rants, there is one thing that none of us want, so is the research theater. One group is conducting research, the other one is pretending that they are interested about the research and the research reports, and it all ends up with these research reports that are being supplemented with highlights, insights, new graphs, and finally Beyoncé songs.
So are you saying we could actually break free from all that together?
Probably. So, I think that after all of this, if we will include the researchers, if you invite you to the table and you want to gaslight yourself that you don't want you at the table, it might be good.
So, you want to try?
Let's try it. And the last quote from the playlist for this speech, Beyoncé, Crazy in Love. That's the last slide. If you would like to connect with us, there are these big QR codes that you can use. And we are also open for questions, and we will try to answer them as long as it's not under the NDA.
Thank you.
Hmm?